The fluorescent lights of Sacred Heart Hospital had become as familiar to Victoria Hayes as her own reflection. For the past 8 months, she'd walked these sterile corridors every evening after work. The sharp scent of disinfectant, now barely registering as she made her way to the pediatric cardiac unit on the 4th floor. Room 412 was decorated with drawings from Jamie's 3rd grade class, a rainbow of hope plastered over institutional beige walls. Her daughter sat propped against pillows, her dark curls splayed across the white hospital gown, eyes fixed on a tablet where she was supposed to be doing homework but was clearly playing a game instead. "Caught you," Victoria said with a gentle smile, setting down the bag of takeout she'd brought for dinner. Jamie grinned without a hint of guilt. "Math can wait. I'm building a unicorn sanctuary. Your teacher might disagree." "Sweetheart." Victoria kissed her daughter's forehead, feeling the familiar flutter of fear when she noticed how pale Jamie's skin looked against the sheets. The congenital heart defect had been manageable for years with medication, but 3 months ago everything had changed. The condition was worsening rapidly, and now Jamie needed a specialized surgical procedure that their insurance company had classified as experimental and therefore not covered. The cost was astronomical. $375,000. Victoria had spent countless sleepless nights researching payment plans, applying for medical grants, and calling every charitable organization she could find. Her savings of $42,000 barely made a dent. The hospital had been patient, but time was running out. Every week, Jamie's cardiologist delivered the same grim message. The surgery needed to happen soon, or the damage would become irreversible. Victoria worked as the marketing director at Thornfield Industries, a prestigious position she'd fought hard to achieve. For 4 years, she'd poured everything into her career, arriving before dawn and staying until her presentations were perfect. Her campaigns had increased the company's market visibility by 60% and brought in millions in new contracts. She was respected, valued, and according to industry standards, significantly underpaid. The irony wasn't lost on her. She created advertisements that convinced people to spend thousands on luxury goods they didn't need, while she couldn't afford the one thing that mattered most, her daughter's life. That was why she found herself standing outside Marcus Thornfield's executive suite at 7 in the morning, smoothing down her navy blazer and rehearsing words that felt impossible to say. She'd requested this meeting through his assistant 3 days ago, marking it as urgent and personal. The approval had come back within hours, which surprised her. Marcus Thornfield didn't do personal meetings. At 38, Marcus was a legend in the business world. He'd inherited a struggling manufacturing company from his father and transformed it into a tech and design empire worth billions. He was brilliant, demanding, and famously aloof. In 4 years of working directly under his leadership, Victoria had never seen him at a company social event, never heard him make small talk, never witnessed any warmth that wasn't calculated for strategic purposes. He was also undeniably attractive in a way that made Victoria uncomfortable to acknowledge. Tall and lean with dark hair that always looked slightly unkempt despite his expensive suits, he had the kind of intense green eyes that seemed to analyze everything. People whispered that he was impossible to please, that he'd never married because no one could meet his exacting standards, that he lived alone in a minimalist penthouse and worked 16-hour days. Victoria knocked twice on the heavy wooden door. "Enter." His voice carried through clearly, deep and controlled. The office was exactly what she expected. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city, modern furniture in blacks and grays, shelves lined with industry awards and architecture books. Marcus sat behind his glass desk, reviewing something on his laptop. He didn't look up immediately, and Victoria waited, her heart hammering against her ribs. When he finally raised his eyes to meet hers, she felt the full weight of his attention. It was like standing in a spotlight that revealed every flaw and secret. "Victoria." He closed his laptop and gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit. Your message said this was urgent." She sat carefully, clutching her portfolio bag in her lap like a shield. "Thank you for making time to see me. I know your schedule is extremely tight. You've never asked for a personal meeting before." Marcus leaned back in his chair, studying her with unnerving focus. In 4 years, you've never requested anything outside of project discussions. So yes, I made time. Victoria took a steadying breath. She'd practiced this speech 100 times in front of her bathroom mirror, but now the words felt clumsy and inadequate. I'm here to discuss my compensation. I've been with Thornfield Industries for 4 years. My work has consistently exceeded performance metrics. The Meridian campaign alone generated $18 million in new revenue. I'm requesting a salary adjustment that reflects my contributions to the company's growth. Marcus's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Interest, perhaps, or calculation. Several seconds of silence stretched between them, thick and uncomfortable. Your work is exemplary, he said finally. I've never questioned your value to this company, but I'm curious about the timing. You've never negotiated for yourself before. Why now? The question caught her off guard. She'd expected pushback about budget constraints or performance reviews, not this probing into her motivations. Heat crept up her neck as she debated how much to reveal. Something in his unwavering gaze told her that half-truths wouldn't work with Marcus Thornfield. He'd built an empire by reading people, by seeing through corporate pleasantries to the desperation or ambition underneath. If she wanted his help, she'd have to offer honesty. My daughter is sick, Victoria heard herself say, the words coming out steadier than she felt. She needs heart surgery. Our insurance won't cover it. I've exhausted every other option. Marcus's expression remained neutral, but his fingers stilled on the armrest of his chair. He stood abruptly and walked to the bar cart near his bookshelf, pouring amber liquid from a crystal decanter into 2 glasses. He offered one to her. Victoria accepted it automatically, even though she never drank before noon. The whiskey burned pleasantly down her throat, warming her from the inside. How much do you need? Marcus asked, his tone almost casual as he returned to stand by the window. $375,000. He didn't flinch at the number. Instead, he took a slow sip of his drink and stared out at the city skyline, his profile sharp against the morning light. When he spoke again, his words came from somewhere darker than she'd expected. I could write you a check right now, Victoria. That amount of money means nothing to my bank account. But I didn't build this company by giving things away for free. He turned to face her, and the intensity in his green eyes made her breath catch. Everything has a price. The question is, what are you willing to pay? Victoria's mind raced through possibilities. Extended work hours, a binding contract, years of service to the company. She could handle any professional demand if it meant saving Jamie. What do you want? Marcus moved closer, stopping a few feet from her chair. He wasn't touching her, wasn't invading her space, but his presence felt overwhelming nonetheless. When he spoke, his words were quiet, but carried a weight that made her realize nothing would ever be the same after this moment. Spend 1 night with me. 1 evening, no expectations beyond that. In exchange, I'll cover your daughter's surgery completely and provide an additional $50,000 for recovery expenses and any complications. He paused, his eyes never leaving hers. Tomorrow, we return to our professional relationship as if nothing happened. You'll receive your raise as well, because you've earned it on merit alone. The world tilted sideways. Victoria's first instinct was to throw the whiskey in his face and walk out, but Jamie's face flashed through her mind. Her daughter's smile before she got sick, the way she used to dance around their apartment to terrible pop music, her dreams of becoming a veterinarian. All of that would die if Victoria couldn't pay for the surgery. The cardiologist had been brutally clear. Without the procedure, Jamie had maybe 6 months before her heart failed completely. With it, she had a 90% chance of living a normal, healthy life. Why? The question escaped before she could stop it. Why would you make an offer like this? Something flickered across Marcus's face, gone so quickly she almost missed it. Vulnerability, maybe, or loneliness so profound it had calcified into something harder. Because I want to know if anyone would choose me if money wasn't part of the equation. Because I'm exhausted by not knowing what's real anymore. And because you're the first person in 10 years who looks at me like I'm human instead of a walking checkbook. The honesty in his admission surprised her more than the proposition itself. She had expected cruelty or entitlement, not this strange mixture of isolation and desperate need for genuine connection. Victoria realized with startling clarity that Marcus Thornfield was as trapped by his wealth as she was by her lack of it, just in different ways. "I need time to think," she managed to say. "You have until 5 this evening. After that, the offer expires and we never speak of it again." His tone had returned to its usual business formality, but his eyes still held that strange vulnerability. "Whatever you decide, Victoria, I want you to know that your position here is secure. This conversation doesn't change my respect for your work." Victoria stood on unsteady legs and left his office without another word. The elevator ride down felt eternal, her reflection in the polished steel doors showing a woman she barely recognized, someone who had just been offered a devil's bargain wrapped in loneliness. The rest of the day passed in a fog. She tried to work on the quarterly marketing report, but the numbers blurred together meaninglessly. During lunch, she called the hospital to check on Jamie. The nurse's update was grim. Her daughter's oxygen levels had dropped overnight, and they were increasing her medication dosage. Time was running out faster than anyone had predicted. Victoria sat in her car in the parking garage at 4:30, hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly, her knuckles turned white. She'd spent the afternoon listing every other option, searching desperately for a different answer. But there was nothing. No fairy godmother, no last-minute inheritance, no miracle grant. Just this one impossible choice. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Jamie's asking when you'll visit tonight. She drew you a picture of you two at the beach. Baby, I don't know how much longer we can keep her spirits up. She knows something is very wrong." That message shattered the last of Victoria's resistance. She wasn't sacrificing herself for an abstract concept or even just for Jamie's life. She was doing it so her daughter could have hope again, so that little girl could stop being brave and just be 8 years old. At 4:55, Victoria walked back into Marcus's office without knocking. He was standing by the window again, hands in his pockets, looking out at the city as if he'd been waiting there all day. He turned when she entered, his expression carefully blank. "I accept," Victoria said, her voice firmer than she felt. "But I have conditions. This happens once and only once. Tomorrow we never mention it again. You transfer the money for Jamie's surgery before anything else happens. And this doesn't change my position here. If you retaliate against me afterward in any way, I'll expose what happened." Marcus nodded slowly, as if he'd expected nothing less. "Agreed to all your terms. The money will be transferred within the hour. I'll send you an address. 8 o'clock tonight." He paused, and something softened in his expression. "Victoria, I want you to know that you can change your mind at any point. Until the moment you walk through that door, you're free to leave. I won't hold it against you." She nodded, not trusting herself to speak, and left before her courage could fail. By 6:15, her phone pinged with a bank notification. $375,000 had been deposited into her account, along with a text from Marcus. "Surgery scheduled for tomorrow at 10. I've spoken with the surgical team personally." Despite everything, relief washed over Victoria so powerfully she had to sit down. Jamie would be okay. Whatever happened tonight, whatever price she paid, her daughter would have a chance at life. In that moment, it felt worth anything. The address Marcus sent led to a private building in the most exclusive neighborhood in the city, the kind of place where doormen wore actual uniforms and knew better than to ask questions. Victoria gave her name to the concierge, who directed her to a private elevator that required a key card. The ride to the penthouse felt interminable, her reflection in the mirrored walls showing a woman in a simple charcoal dress, hair loose around her shoulders, minimal makeup. She'd chosen to dress with quiet dignity rather than seduction, unwilling to play into whatever fantasy Marcus might have constructed. As she watched the floor numbers climb, Victoria made a decision. She wouldn't enter this night as a victim or a transaction. She would go with her eyes open, her spine straight. And if there was a way to reclaim some power in this impossible situation, she would find it. The elevator opened directly into the penthouse, and what she saw stopped her breath. The entire space was glass and light, floor-to-ceiling windows offering a panoramic view of the city glittering below like a galaxy brought to Earth. but it wasn't cold or sterile as she'd expected. Warm lighting created intimate pockets of space, and the furniture, modern but comfortable, was arranged in a way that suggested someone actually lived here, not just existed. Soft music played from hidden speakers, something classical she didn't recognize. A bottle of wine sat on the coffee table beside 2 glasses, and she could smell something cooking from what must be the kitchen. Marcus stood by the window, still in his work clothes but with his jacket removed and his sleeves rolled up. When he turned to face her, something in his expression had changed from the calculated businessman of that afternoon. He looked uncertain, almost vulnerable. "You came," he said simply, as if he hadn't quite believed she would. "I keep my promises." Victoria stepped fully into the apartment, and the elevator doors whispered shut behind her, sealing her into this decision. Marcus moved toward her but stopped several feet away, maintaining distance. "I made dinner. I thought we could eat first, talk. If that's acceptable to you." The consideration in his voice surprised her. This wasn't what she'd steeled herself for. "You cook?" A ghost of a smile crossed his face. "Don't sound so shocked. I live alone. The choices were learn to cook or survive on takeout forever." He gestured toward the dining area, where she could now see a table set for 2, candles waiting to be lit. "It's nothing fancy. Pasta salad. I wasn't sure what you liked." Victoria found herself following him, her practiced defenses faltering in the face of his unexpected normalcy. The dining table was positioned to take advantage of the view, and as Marcus lit the candles, the city lights beyond created a breathtaking backdrop. He'd made carbonara, the real kind with pancetta and fresh pasta and a Caesar salad from scratch. As they ate, an awkward silence stretched between them, broken only by the soft clink of silverware against plates. "Tell me about your daughter," Marcus said finally. "What's she like?" Victoria looked up startled. "Why do you want to know?" "Because she's important to you." "Because I'd like to understand what I'm helping to save." His green eyes were steady, genuine. "Please." So Victoria found herself talking about Jamie, about how her daughter was obsessed with animals, how she'd spent last Halloween volunteering at a shelter instead of trick-or-treating, how she could name every constellation visible from their apartment window. The words came easier than she expected, and Marcus listened with an attention that felt rare and precious. "She sounds remarkable," he said when Victoria finished. "Like her mother." "You don't know me well enough to make that judgment, don't I?" Marcus set down his fork. "I've watched you for 4 years, Victoria. The way you handle impossible deadlines without complaining, how you mentor junior staff members even when you're drowning in your own work, the fact that you've never once taken credit for someone else's ideas. You think I don't notice these things?" The intensity in his voice made her chest tighten. "Then why this? If you respect me so much, why make such a degrading offer?" Marcus stood abruptly and walked to the window, his shoulders tense. When he spoke, his voice was raw with something she'd never heard from him before. Honest pain. "Do you know what it's like to have everything and nothing simultaneously?" "I'm 38 years old, Victoria. I've built an empire that spans continents. I can buy anything, go anywhere, have almost anyone. And I've never had a single conversation where I wasn't wondering what the other person wanted from me. Every friendship, every relationship, every interaction is tainted by the question of whether they'd still be there if the money disappeared." He turned to face her, and in the candlelight, she could see the loneliness etched into his features. "You came here tonight because you're desperate, yes, but you also came with conditions, with boundaries, with clear eyes about what this is. That's more honesty than I've experienced in a decade. For one night, I wanted to know what it feels like to be chosen, even if the reasons are complicated. Even if it's not real." Victoria stood and moved toward him, drawn by the vulnerability in his admission. "You're right that I'm here out of desperation. But Marcus, this isn't the way to find genuine connection. You can't buy authenticity, can't I?" His laugh was bitter. "I'm not buying authenticity, Victoria. I'm buying the absence of pretense. You're not here pretending to fall for my charm or laughing at jokes that aren't funny. You're here with your eyes open, and somehow that feels more real than anything I've experienced." They stood facing each other, the city lights casting shadows across both their faces. Victoria realized that Marcus Thornfield wasn't the cold, calculating businessman everyone believed him to be. He was just desperately lonely, trapped in a cage built from dollar bills and unable to find his way out. "What happens now?" she asked softly. Marcus reached out slowly, giving her time to pull away, and brushed a strand of hair from her face. His touch was surprisingly gentle. "Now we stop pretending this is just a transaction. I won't lie to you, Victoria. I want you. I've wanted you for longer than I care to admit, but I don't want you afraid or resigned. So we're going to sit on that couch, drink wine, and talk. And if at any point you want to leave, you walk out that door and the deal still stands. Jamie gets her surgery, you get your raise, and we never speak of this night again." "And if I stay?" The question came out as barely a whisper. His green eyes darkened with something that made her pulse quicken. "Then I'm going to spend the rest of this evening showing you exactly how much I notice you. Every brilliant idea you've had, every time you bit your lip while concentrating on a presentation. Every moment I've had to force myself to look away because watching you was becoming an addiction." Victoria knew she should be offended, should feel objectified. Instead, heat pooled low in her stomach. There was something intoxicating about being truly seen, about realizing that while she'd been carefully not noticing Marcus, he'd been failing at the same thing. "I'm not good at casual," she admitted. "I don't know how to separate emotion from physical intimacy." "Then don't." Marcus stepped closer, his hand coming to rest lightly on her waist. "I'm not asking you to feel nothing, Victoria. I'm asking you to feel everything and let me do the same, even if it's just for tonight." He kissed her then, soft and questioning, and Victoria felt something shift inside her chest. This wasn't the cold transaction she'd braced herself for. This was Marcus Thornfield peeling back his armor and showing her the lonely man underneath, hoping desperately that she might see him as human. She kissed him back, her hands finding the front of his shirt, and felt him exhale in relief against her mouth. They moved to the couch, wine forgotten, the city lights bearing witness as they explored this dangerous territory between transaction and genuine desire. Marcus touched her like she was precious, mapping the curves of her body with reverent hands. He whispered things in her ear, how he'd noticed the way she took her coffee, how her laugh during meetings had become his favorite sound, how seeing her with her hair down for the first time tonight had nearly undone him. Victoria found herself responding with equal honesty, admitting things she hadn't meant to say, that she'd always been hyper-aware of him in meetings, that his rare smiles had become something she unconsciously tried to earn, that she'd convinced herself her awareness of him was just professional respect when it had been something far more complicated. As the night deepened and their clothes fell away, Victoria realized they were both seeking the same thing, proof that connection could exist even in impossible circumstances, that two people could find each other even across the minefield of money and desperation. When Marcus finally carried her to his bedroom, the city spread out below them like a blanket of stars. Victoria made a choice. She wouldn't spend this night regretting or resisting. She would be fully present for whatever this was. Transaction, escape, or perhaps the beginning of something neither of them had the courage to name yet. Marcus made love to her with an intensity that spoke of long, suppressed desire, and Victoria matched him, surprised by her own hunger. They moved together like they'd been learning each other's rhythms for years instead of hours, and when she finally shattered in his arms, she heard him whisper her name like a prayer. Afterward, they lay tangled in his sheets, breathing hard, the city lights casting geometric patterns across their skin. Marcus pulled her close, his hand tracing lazy patterns on her shoulder. "Stay," he murmured against her hair. "Don't leave yet." Victoria knew she should go, should maintain the boundaries they'd set. But something in his voice, a plea wrapped in loneliness, made her nod against his chest. Just a few more hours, she told herself. Just until morning. As she drifted toward sleep, safe in the circle of his arms, Victoria couldn't shake the feeling that this night had changed something fundamental. They'd each come looking for a transaction and found something far more dangerous instead, a connection that felt terrifyingly real. Victoria woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the immediate crushing weight of reality. For one disoriented moment, she didn't know where she was. Then Marcus shifted beside her, his arm draped across her waist, and every detail of the previous night came rushing back. She'd slept with her boss. Not just slept with him. She'd spent hours talking with him, laughing with him, letting him see parts of herself she usually kept carefully hidden. She'd fallen asleep in his arms, feeling safe and wanted, and that was perhaps the most dangerous part of all. Carefully, Victoria slipped out from under Marcus's arm and began gathering her clothes from where they'd been scattered across his bedroom floor. Each piece felt like evidence of her terrible judgment. Her dress, her shoes, the simple underwear that now seemed embarrassingly practical in the harsh morning light. Running away, Marcus's voice came from the bed, rough with sleep. Victoria turned to find him propped up on one elbow, watching her with those green eyes that saw too much. His dark hair was mussed, and the sheet had slipped low enough to reveal the lean muscle of his chest. He looked unfairly attractive, and Victoria hated that she noticed. "I need to get to the hospital. Jamie's surgery is at 10. She pulled on her dress, not bothering with the zipper yet. This was what we agreed to. One night, Marcus sat up fully, the sheet pooling around his waist. "Victoria, wait. We should talk about—" "There's nothing to talk about." She cut him off, her voice sharper than intended. "You kept your end of the bargain. I kept mine. Now we go back to our professional relationship exactly as you promised." She saw something flash in his eyes. Hurt, maybe, or frustration. But his expression quickly shuddered back to neutral, the businessman's mask sliding into place. "Of course. You're right." He stood, unself-conscious about his nudity, and pulled on a pair of sweatpants from a nearby chair. "I'll drive you to the hospital." "That's not necessary. Victoria." His voice was gentle but firm. "Your daughter is having major surgery today. Let me drive you. It's the least I can do." The ride to Sacred Heart Hospital was thick with uncomfortable silence. Marcus had dressed quickly in jeans and a simple black shirt, looking more approachable than she'd ever seen him at the office. His car was a sleek black sedan that probably cost more than she'd earned in 5 years. But he drove carefully, his attention on the road. "Thank you," Victoria said finally, as they pulled into the hospital parking garage. "For the money, for arranging the surgery, for everything." Marcus's hands tightened on the steering wheel. "I spoke with Jamie's surgical team yesterday. They're the best in the country. She's going to be fine. You didn't have to do that." "Yes, I did." He turned to look at her, his expression unreadable. "Victoria last night was a one-time arrangement. We both knew that going in." She opened the car door, needing to escape before the emotion threatening to overwhelm her could break free. "I'll see you at the office next week." She was halfway to the hospital entrance when she heard him call her name. Victoria turned to find Marcus standing beside his car, hands in his pockets, looking lost in a way that made her chest ache. "I meant what I said last night," he called across the parking lot. "All of it." Victoria didn't know how to respond to that, so she simply turned and walked into the hospital, leaving him standing there among the parked cars and morning shadows. Jamie was already in pre-op when Victoria arrived. Her small body dwarfed by the hospital bed. She'd been given medication to help her relax, and her dark eyes were slightly unfocused but still lit up when she saw her mother. "Mama!" Jamie reached out her arms. "They said the surgery is today. They said I'm going to get better." Victoria gathered her daughter close, breathing in the familiar scent of her strawberry shampoo mixed with hospital antiseptic. "That's right, baby. The doctors are going to fix your heart, and then you'll be able to run and play just like before. Will it hurt? You'll be asleep the whole time. You won't feel anything." Victoria smoothed Jamie's hair back from her forehead. "And when you wake up, I'll be right here. I promise." Victoria's mother arrived just as they were wheeling Jamie into surgery. Margaret Hayes was a strong woman who'd raised Victoria alone after her father left, but today her hands shook as she hugged her granddaughter goodbye. "How did you manage this?" Margaret whispered to Victoria as they watched Jamie disappear through the surgical doors. "Last week you said there was no way to come up with the money." Victoria felt heat creep up her neck. "I worked something out. A loan from the company. A loan." Margaret's eyes were sharp. Victoria Marie Hayes, what did you do? What I had to do to save my daughter. Victoria's voice came out harder than intended. Can we not do this right now? I need to focus on Jamie. Margaret was quiet for a moment, studying her daughter's face. You're different this morning. Something happened. Mom, please. All right. Margaret squeezed her hand. But when Jamie is better, you and I are going to have a long talk. The surgery took 7 hours. Victoria and Margaret sat in the surgical waiting room, watching families come and go, drinking terrible coffee from the vending machine, pretending to read magazines while their hearts hammered with fear. At hour 5, Victoria's phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Nina. How's Jamie? Been thinking about you all day. Nina Reeves had been Victoria's friend since college, and she was one of the few people who knew the full extent of Jamie's medical crisis. Victoria started to type a response, then stopped. How could she possibly explain what she'd done? Another text came through, this one from an unknown number. Any updates? Thinking of you both. Victoria stared at the message, recognizing Marcus's careful concern, even without his name attached. Something softened in her chest before she could stop it. He was thinking of them, worrying from wherever he was. The realization felt dangerous. She didn't respond to either message. Finally, at 5:15, the surgical doors opened and Jamie's surgeon emerged, still in his scrubs but smiling. The surgery was a complete success. Jamie did beautifully. Her heart is strong and the repair looks perfect. She'll need a few weeks of recovery, but I expect a full return to normal activity. Victoria felt her knees buckle with relief. Margaret caught her and they clung to each other, crying tears they'd been holding back for months. Jamie was going to be okay. Her baby was going to live, to grow up, to have the future that had been slipping away. When they were finally allowed into recovery, Jamie was still groggy from anesthesia, but awake. She smiled sleepily when she saw them. Hi, Mama, did they fix me? Yes, sweetheart. You're all fixed. Victoria kissed her daughter's forehead, her hand, any part of her she could reach. You're going to be perfect. As Jamie drifted back to sleep, Victoria pulled out her phone and, before she could overthink it, typed a message to Marcus's number. Surgery was successful. Jamie's going to be fine. Thank you for everything. His response came immediately. I'm so glad. If you need anything, transportation, meals, anything at all, please let me know. No strings attached. Victoria stared at those last 3 words. No strings attached. That's what they'd agreed to, wasn't it? One night, then back to normal. So why did his message feel like it was offering so much more? That evening, after Margaret had gone home and Jamie was sleeping peacefully in her hospital room, Victoria finally called Nina. Her friend answered on the first ring. Oh, thank God, Nina breathed. I've been worried sick. How's Jamie? She's perfect. The surgery went even better than expected. Victoria sank into the uncomfortable chair beside Jamie's bed. Nina, I did something terrible. What do you mean terrible? You saved your daughter's life. That's not terrible. I slept with my boss for the money. The words came out in a rush, unburdened by the weight of keeping them secret. Marcus Thornfield. He offered to pay for Jamie's surgery if I spent one night with him, and I said yes. Silence on the other end of the line. Then, okay, walk me through this. Start from the beginning. So Victoria told her everything. The impossible offer, her desperate acceptance, the night that had been so much more complicated than a simple transaction. When she finished, Nina was quiet for a long moment. Are you okay? Nina asked finally. I mean physically, emotionally, are you okay? I don't know. Victoria looked at Jamie's sleeping face, so peaceful now that the pain was gone. I did what I had to do to save her. I don't regret that. But Nina, it wasn't what I expected. He wasn't what I expected. And I'm terrified that I've made everything so much more complicated. Did he hurt you? Force you in any way? No, the opposite actually. He was gentle, considerate. He gave me multiple chances to leave, and he looked at me like I mattered, like I was more than just a transaction. That's the part that scares me the most, Nina sighed. Oh, honey. You caught feelings? I did not catch feelings. Victoria's protest came out too quick, too defensive. It was one night. I was emotional and scared, and he was unexpectedly kind. That's all. Victoria, I've known you for 15 years. You don't do casual. You never have. If he treated you with genuine care, if you felt a connection, then yes, you caught feelings. The question is, what are you going to do about it? Nothing. I'm going to do nothing. I'm going to go back to work next week, keep my head down, and pretend it never happened. That's what we agreed to. And you think that's actually going to work? Nina's skepticism was clear. You think you can go back to seeing him every day in meetings and pretending you don't remember what his hands felt like on your skin? Come on. You're smarter than that. Victoria closed her eyes, exhaustion and emotional overload finally catching up with her. I don't know what else to do, Nina. I can't have feelings for Marcus Thornfield. He's my boss. He's a billionaire who lives in a completely different world. And this whole thing started with me essentially selling myself to him. How could anything real ever come from that? Maybe it couldn't, Nina said gently. Or maybe sometimes things that start in darkness can grow toward the light. I'm not saying you should pursue this, Vic. I'm just saying don't make decisions based on shame or fear. Make them based on what you actually want. After they hung up, Victoria sat in the quiet hospital room, watching Jamie breathe easily for the first time in months. Her daughter was safe. That was what mattered. That was what all of this had been for. So why did she keep thinking about the way Marcus had whispered her name in the darkness, like it was something precious? Why did her traitorous heart keep insisting that last night had been more than just a transaction, that the connection between them had been real? Her phone buzzed with another message from Marcus. I know you need space. I understand that. But please know that if you need anything, support, time off, someone to talk to, I'm here. What happened between us doesn't have to define what comes next. Victoria stared at the message for a long time. Then slowly she typed back, I need time to figure out what comes next. But thank you for today. For caring about Jamie. That meant more than you know. His response was immediate. Take all the time you need. She's lucky to have you as her mother. Victoria set down her phone and curled up in the hospital chair, pulling a thin blanket over herself. Tomorrow she would figure out how to move forward. Tomorrow she would start building the walls she needed to keep her heart safe. But tonight she let herself remember how it felt to be held by someone who saw her, really saw her, and didn't look away, even if it could never happen again.